Welcome to the Tribe Digital Marketing Series. Today, I'm joined by Michael Hartmann, who is going to talk to us about MarTech, marketing ops, end-to-end marketing process, all that great stuff. Michael, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Yeah, so just wanted to jump in real quick. And when I say technology is going to solve all your problems, you say what?
Not very likely. I mean, I think technology can certainly be a benefit. And I'm a technology guy at heart. Engineering background and everything, and somehow ended up in marketing. But I, by no means, would tell you that I would start with technology first. I think to solve the problems, you need to understand what's causing the problem, and usually that's not technology. It's usually people and process. And technology is, in a lot of ways, makes those processes, the bad processes, go faster, right, as opposed to making them better.
Yeah. Why do you think it is that marketers latch onto technology so much as that landscape continues to grow and balloon out? You know, the MarTech
Right.
super graphic now is what, 7,500, 8,500 technologies.
Yeah, I think last week it came out at somewhere over 8,000, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people were predicting a lot of consolidation, and I would have been one of those people as well.
Right.
And I think, to me, what I see, that landscape has continued to expand from a few thousand to where it is today. And really, I think it's a symptom of people knowing, like, marketing automation is the kind of the big behemoth in the middle of all this stuff, and maybe in CRM. Once you get past that, there's lots of little things that people want to be able to do and problems that we want to solve. And so there's all these little niche solutions that tend to go towards each of those. The problem is, as you start adding and bolting those things on, it becomes more and more complicated on what your solution is. So, then it becomes difficult to react.
Yeah.
Which is kind of probably where a lot of people are right now, is they're trying to react to, the current situation, whether that's they're trying to figure out, well, we've got people gone, how do we figure out what it's actually happening behind the scenes when it doesn't work? Or they're going, hey, do we really need all this stuff, or do we need to start, reducing that? And they don't know what the impact is going to be. So the challenge, I think, is that, you get all these people trying to solve all these little problems when there are probably bigger things that need to be solved first.
Yeah.
And then you add on to that from there.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the concept of getting to the root of a problem, right? And I'm very interested in this idea of the scratching the little itches with these one-off technology solutions, because I believe it exacerbates what is a big root problem that nobody really wants to dig in and get to the heart of, which is just silos within an organization, silos between marketing and sales, silos between ops and marketing, silos between this and that, whatever it may be. What have you seen in terms of just the silos? How do they start? How do they just keep getting worse? Am I off my rocker? What are you seeing?
It's funny, as I was kind of getting my head right for this conversation, what I was coming back to is that not only is it the silos of these applications and what they do, and the people and what they do, what ultimately it is you're trying to reconcile. Say you want to understand, how do we go after our, to grow our business with existing customers, right? Just understanding what is an existing customer is really hard for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So that's because you've got finance systems that are doing one thing, right? Finance and accounting, and they're billing. You've got customer support that may be a different thing, and they've got their processes. You've got marketing, and you get sales, right? And there's not really this incentive across all of them to coordinate that data and make sure you have a full picture of what's going on.
Right.
Great example. A company I worked at before here was a high-tech manufacturer in the telecom industry, in particular for test and measurement. Well, customer support, when the Canadian anti-spam law was going into effect, we wanted to go into our database and try to go solicit those people, right?
Right.
And so we just tried to trove every database we could, and one of them was our customer support one. What we found out pretty quickly is that was total crap for marketing purposes. And the biggest reason was, literally, these were people who would use our equipment, would be, hanging on a cell tower. They're testing a line, or they're testing an antenna. They're not in a place where they're going to type in, here's my email address, here's my company. The incentive for the people on the phone for our side was to get them the help they needed and move on, right?
Right.
So you can imagine right now, try to bring that into some sort of CRM so that if you're a salesperson, hey, this person just had a tech problem. How do I be prepared for that? If there's an issue, we've got a deal going. Like, it's nearly impossible. Now, that's just one small example. You start getting into finance and accounting, and then it becomes even more. And then you've got to trust people to do the right thing when it comes to keeping the data accurate and correct. And I've yet to be at a place where that's done super effectively.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you use that example because I remember very explicitly a conversation with a customer. This was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and more of your traditional type of company, semiconductor company, right?
Yep.
And we were looking to help them run an automated campaign through a platform, like Marketo, and they wanted to run a customer campaign. I'm like, okay, great. Where's the data coming from? And they're like, well, we don't know who our customers are. It's like, okay, well, we sell through the channel so much and this and that. And I'm thinking, you don't know who your customers are at all. He's like, can we send out a survey or something to people and ask if they bought our product? Like, that's not the customer experience you're looking to solve for.
No.
So what do you think is the root of that story is, what do you think the root is of not wanting to cross the bridge and reach your hand across the aisle to sales, success, finance, whoever, and try to wrangle it together? Is it just because it's too hard?
Well, so my move into marketing was in database marketing, and part of what I liked about it compared to having done financial data warehousing stuff in the past is it was a little bit messy.
Yeah.
I kind of like that, but I think you've hit on what it is, right? I think there's at least two things, right? One is, especially in the B2B world, right? Customer data is messy, right? There's no, unless you're really diligent about scrubbing data, running it through address standardization, doing all that kind of stuff on a regular basis in a coordinated way across all these places where the data comes in, it's really hard to then bring it together. The second is, right, wrong, or indifferent, right? The incentives aren't there for these different teams to really focus on that, right? And so I think as much as talk as there's been about big data and, data as an asset and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Because it's complicated, because it's expensive to try to do that, especially for smaller players, right? If you're a big company, you can probably afford, to buy the applications and the systems and hire people whose job is to keep data quality good. There's a reason why companies like D&B and others are out there that have, survived for so long, right? And even you talk to people, I'm a D&B fan, I've used them in the past and they're great, and there are others that do it well, right? But I don't know that anybody goes, well, that's the perfect answer, right? That's going to solve our problem of figuring out who are all our customers, who are those that are prospects. And then you get into complicated things like what's added to it now is the fact that you got so many people working from home, right?
Right.
So now if someone says, hey, I want to sign up for something, and I'm using personal email address, if I have to put an address, I'm going to put in my home address, because if something goes to the office, it'll may go bad or die or whatever. And so now you're going, well, how do you then get, is this a new person? Is it an existing person, right? Even at the individual person level, it's complicated.
Identity resolution is a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially for organizations that have, oftentimes just looking financial services a lot, right? Or banks and credit unions and things like that. They have that issue of a single household sharing, 5 people in a house sharing a single email address or a couple, things like that. And it's just such a difficult thing to manage from a database standpoint.
Yep. It's absolutely true. And just a small example, just the other day, one of our kids homeschool right now, we're trying to figure out how do we connect them with one of the other kids that lives relatively close to us because we're private school. So I looked up the roster and I saw this one family that's really close, right within a mile, which I didn't know.
Right.
And I looked at the email addresses for mom and dad, and I was like, wait a minute, this is really just mom's email address, right? Dad, had I not been looking at it right, and a little different view of things because of what I've done professionally, that's just a small example of, this is like a school, right? So if they wanted to get a hold of dad, Maybe they have a phone number too. I don't know, but if the school ever wanted to contact dad for Mother's Day stuff, it's like, how would they do that? I don't know how they would do it. And you
Yeah.
take that and multiply it by thousands and thousands of customers, and it is still, it's a really interesting problem, and I still am fascinated by it. I don't know that it's been solved yet anywhere that I've seen.
Yeah, for sure. Well, wondering then to get your take on this statement. So I have a good friend of mine who's a consultant for us, and he likes to say that process creates data.
Mm.
So if you take that logic out the next step, does bad process create bad data?
So what I would augment that with is it's process and people create data, right?
Okay.
Right, because ultimately, as much as we want to automate things, there's people who have to typically, they're either entering data or they're doing something that's going to trigger data changes or whatever, right? So the example I mean there's, so for my world, right, marketing to sales or doing demand generation, lead qualification and routing,
Mhm.
you know, we want the salesperson who picks up a lead to send the signal back that they've got the lead, they're going to
Yep.
work it, right? Right. That
Absolutely.
requires it's something to happen in a CRM system in
Hmm.
Salesforce or whatever. And I didn't always trust that was going to happen, right? Not because they're bad people. I
Sure.
always would tell the chief revenue officer, right, the most important thing is me that they're following up on the lead. I mean, ideally they're doing that and updating the system and letting us know, but that's a secondary thing.
Right.
But it goes to that incentive part, right, and the ability to coordinate. So yeah, bad process, that is asking people to do things that are either too difficult or outside of the normal what they have to do to achieve their goals. Um, and those incentives not being there for those people. Those, I think that I agree. Bad process does beget bad data, right? And I think I said it earlier, right? If you have a system that is reinforcing that bad process, it doesn't get you better data. It gets you the same bad data faster. And then if
Yeah.
you're going to use that data to make decisions, you're really like you're making bad decisions
Now you're
faster.
in a bad place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you started touching on something that's, you talked about incentive compensation. You talked about in order for marketing to see what's working and what's not and have that feedback loop, they need someone to input something into a system,
Yeah.
which highlights overarching in marketing. It doesn't matter if it's from the process side or even, sending a message to a buyer. There's an inherent dependency in marketing on lots of different things,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So marketing, in my view, has a sales dependency, right?
Yes.
In B2B marketing. Okay.
Absolutely.
So what are some things that you've done in your career to bridge that gap and amplify that dependency and make it strong and not one where it's adversary?
So there's a couple of things I've done. One, it helps that I've been in their shoes before for a very
Mm-hmm.
short period of time. I was in
It does.
sales, and there's a reason why uh, I'm in marketing. I could have been okay at sales. It was not what I was not made to be a salesperson. It's just
Sure.
not who I am, and that's okay. But I at least now understand what it takes to be a successful salesperson to some degree, and how hard it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a hard job, and so anybody who says it's not is probably never sold before.
True.
So that's one, right? It helps that I understand that. The second is, I I try to make the things we want them to do as simple as possible, right? So if what we want is that signal back that they're taking the lead, we just change the status.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really hard is getting that communicated and change, especially if you're in an organization where that's not been the expected behavior, right?
Norm, yeah.
Yeah. So and there's no reinforcement. So part of what I have to do is like I try to keep it simple. That's one. That usually doesn't solve it by itself. So there's two other things. One is try to highlight what marketing's value has been, right, as much as we can, right? So start talking about attribution and ROI and those things. It makes it difficult when those things aren't happening because you're missing those links in that chain of building that model. Again, okay, but you want to do what you can to show that. But the other part is when I can, have as one-on-one or small group discussions about why it's important.
Right.
Um, and so I know Serious Decision Summit's going on this week, right? And I'm a big fan of theirs. Not been to the summit, but the idea of buying groups and that kind of stuff. I kept telling people, if you want to understand how do we go after our customers,
Right.
one of the things you could do down the road is help us understand who are the people that are playing a part in the buy
In
or
the
not
buy
buy
decision. Yeah.
buying decision, so that down the road, if we do that consistently in a good way, right, we start to build a picture of what do those buying groups look like at a certain kind of company for this product or service. Then we can start to really do targeted marketing activities to support what you're doing for sales, or we can just help you identify these are the ones you want to target, and by the way, these are the people we know of. You're missing these other two people that you need. Typically, they're part of that buying decision, right?
Right.
So try to help them understand what, like, this is the short-term need that me selfishly as a marketer wanting to be able to show our value, which you don't really care about probably because you're trying to get the deal, right?
All right.
Get it? But the part that I want to help them is, like, the more we do this consistently across the board, the better you and others are going to be down the road, right? The more valuable, the more confidence we'll have in marketing's impact on revenue or pipeline, and the better we'll be able to do at targeting marketing activities to support your sales activities down the road. So there's a little bit of a trying to build a case about what the future might look like that would be. Where it's difficult is when that's you're trying to do that. Those one-on-one conversations have always been successful.
Sure.
It doesn't take a lot of time really to build that, and you can show them what it does. The problem is when you've got thousands of salespeople,
It's tough to
that
scale.
doesn't scale.
Yeah.
And so maybe things will get better now that people are used to being on these kinds of virtual discussions,
Right.
in group settings. But what I had found in the past, when you try to do that, even on a small group, say a small office or something, that people invariably weren't paying attention. And again, it's because their priorities, and what they're incented on are going to be different than paying attention to that particular part of a one piece of an agenda in an overall team meeting or something.
Yeah. You started to go down this path a little bit, and I think around the periphery of it, and even in that discussion, but you mentioned the word attribution. What is right about attribution and what is wrong about attribution?
So I'm a fan of attribution. I built kind of cobbled together an attribution modeling capability at a previous company where it was custom integration between, at that time, Eloqua and a CRM, and really think it's valuable and important. It's part of why I still like marketing, is that I think the part of the benefit of all this technology and what we've got now is that you're able to have a lot more data about to help understand what's been effective or not. So I think it's important to do it, but I also think that attribution modeling, and this is going to probably upset a lot of technology companies out there, that their whole model is built on really sophisticated attribution modeling. Modeling is that it's a really complicated math problem right off the gate, right? Even the simplest attribution modeling tools out there are going to be complicated, especially if you're not really into the data, you're not into the process that's built the data, and how it's doing that. I think you have to be careful about how you use it, right? So that's probably the biggest thing. So the benefit is it does give you an idea of direction. I think directionally is marketing having an impact, right? And if you go to market in a disciplined way, right, you're able to break that down by types of tactics you're doing or types of segments you're going after and things like that. But I'm also always cautious about saying, "Oh, marketing generated X amount of pipeline, or marketing generated X amount of revenue." Because especially in a complex B2B sale, right? That is not likely to go over well, or even be believed by a lot of people, right? Marketing could play a role, and I absolutely believe that. But we're not closing deals either, right? If we're not doing e-commerce. But
that's a great point.
Yeah, I think so I think that's the problem, right? So I'm a fan. I've become more of a believer in that, attribution modeling is still important. Keep it, again, as simple as possible. Use it as a guidepost to know, are you directionally moving in the right direction, and try to use that. Help it, you can use it potentially to help build a case for more investment in other marketing activities or technology or, programs or things like that. But I think the caution I would have is trying to say, it's not ROI, right? In the financial world sense. If I went to a finance person and showed them our marketing attribution, they would probably go, well, that's nice and interesting, but have you actually generated more revenue? And I'd have a big question mark over my head, right? I think so, but I'm not 100% confident, and probably less than 80% confident in that, right?
Yeah.
Unless those processes are really, really tight, that loop is closed, and you really know your customers, right? All those things we already talked about, which tend to be not already fundamental problems in most organizations.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that if you can take the lens of directionality and say, hey, these are things that are working because of XYZ, let's put some more emphasis here versus over here, and not what you tend to see, and that you were saying, is the credit game. If you go in and say, hey, coming in banging your chest and saying, hey, we're doing this, and this,
yep,
then you're creating a greater divide, in my opinion, between the other side of the organization. Whereas if it's used in a, more positive manner, it's actually going to help bring the two together and, bring insights to sales. Use attribution to say, hey, here's some things that are happening. This might be a cool place for us to look, or should we do something around here together? Where I think that use of attribution could help bridge the gap rather than create a bigger divide.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. So in terms of process, we've talked about that a little bit. You talked about the people side of it. One of the biggest challenges that I've seen within organizations is, whether it's rolling out a new process, defining, a tweak to a process, is the change management component of it. And I feel like it just doesn't get the attention that it probably deserves. And I'm not saying it's just on a process side. It could be anything, rolling out a new piece of content that you're going to, use in a campaign and then ask sales to use. What has been your experience with good change management, if you've had it, or what are the blockers to it?
Yeah, I think that, to me, right, size of the organization is probably and I don't mean revenue size, but number of people that are affected by the change is the real variable that makes it, the bigger that number goes, I'm not even sure it may not be exponentially more difficult as the number goes, but it probably gets closer to that. But I'm sitting here thinking, do I have a really good example of where we've done a great job of change management? And we had one at Freeman where we rolled out we basically shifted completely some operational communications that were going out over to a marketing automation platform. And I think we did about as good a job as we could have about communicating it to the point where, we had some hiccups, and luckily, part of that communication got out to somebody who was an account manager. There was something that went out that shouldn't have. And that person was able to help us sort of facilitate the conversation with the customer about how do we address it? Do we fix it? Do we, whatever we do. And so I think from that standpoint, that went fairly well, even though like the overall change had issues, but we knew it was going to have issues, right? We just knew it was such a big change. So I think that is one that helps. What hasn't, what I've always struggled with is where it's funny, right? I actually had a relatively small change when we launched new demand generation and marketing automation capabilities at Freeman.
Right.
Just reaching all the way out to the leaves of the brand, the tree, when it came to the sales organization about the change. Over time, it kind of made its way out there, but it took a while for that to get out there, even though we did, as much as we thought we could to communicate the changes and what the impacts were, what the expectations were. but it still took a while to get out there.
Yeah, it seems like setting the expectation in itself is probably as big a part of success as anything, right?
Yeah, well, I think the lesson learned for me is that especially when it's a really large organization or a large number of people affected, is that you need to anticipate that that change management doesn't stop when you go launch or you go live, right? It
Right.
continues, and that's the part that I think is forgotten, right? You go, okay, we make this big change, we launched, we've already done our communication, done. Let's move on to the next big thing,
Right.
right? There
Yeah.
needs to be that ongoing kind of reinforcement about it, including talking about, did it do what we expected it to do? Did it not do it? Did we have issues?
Feedback loop.
Right? Yeah, and try to learn from it. I think that is still, this is a difficult thing for a lot of places, and you know, if you got an organization that's going through lots of change anyway, any particular change project is going to have even more of a challenge at that front as well, which we also had.
For sure. Well, let's circle back a little bit to the beginning of the conversation, right? We set the
Sure.
stage with marketers love to buy technology,
Yeah.
right? So, Mr. Marketer, if you were to come in, what would you do to build your ideal tech stack? You can talk about specific technologies. You could talk about your process for evaluation, however you want to look at it. But what is your approach to building a tech stack?
So the assumption coming in, and there's already something in place, right? Some amount of a solution in place.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's tough to say that you're coming in on a clean slate. There's not too many
yeah,
opportunities like that anymore.
I mean, outside of like a absolutely brand new startup that you're a part of initiating, right? So, I mean, the first thing is you got to understand what you have already, right? That's number one, period, right? And I think that falls into two stages, right? You understand what are the components, what are the technologies that are there, what do they do, how do they interact, to at least a basic level. And in my experiences, there's always going to be some undocumented hidden thing that is happening that you don't know about, but you'll figure it out as you go along the way. Right. So that's number one. The other, I think, goes to the data, right? You need to understand how are those processes and things in the tools either helping or hindering data quality and data improvement. So I think you need to sort of inventory and assess where you are, right? From there, I think then you can start to go, okay, do we still need, do we have the right set of technologies? Well, I'll back up a little bit. From that, a lot of times what you'll see is, hey, there's, especially if you start saying, oh, there's data quality issue, right? Maybe there's small fixes and changes you can make now to just make some incremental improvements. I'm a big believer in, making some progress, along the way, even if it's not ultimately where you want to be, you're still making some progress towards an end state that you want. So I think that would be kind of step 1A, if you will. Step 2 is then to start really going, okay, do we really, do we need all this? Do we not need it? Could we do it a different way? Do we need to renegotiate our levels of service, things like that, right?
So in that assessment process, what are you assessing against, right? Because in my view anyway, and correct me where I'm wrong, your technology infrastructure should be enabling how you go to market.
Yes.
Right. So I think, yes, we do want to assess, but what are we assessing against?
Yeah, good point. So I would say two things, right? One is, how do you want to go to market? How do you expect to be going to market now and maybe in the near future, right? So if you're shifting to more of a digital, right? If you'd known that. The other is organizational readiness kind of standpoint. So
yeah, I like that.
I've come into ones where inherited a stack that was set up in a fairly complicated way. And part of what I realized pretty quickly is that the organization wasn't ready for that complicated way, and that we had to simplify. So part of, like, rather than changing out components necessarily, we sort of used what we could, and it eventually over a period of time really radically simplified and sort of rebuilding the whole stack up. In this case, marketing automation was the core, right? And I think that is the core. So I think that's, that those two components, right? Is your organization ready for what you're talking about? And maybe you're a little more sophisticated and say, when I had a lot of people come to me in some places, we need to do ABM, right? We need to go, which what they were thinking is we need an ABM technology, which I'm like, okay, first off,
ABM is not technology.
No, it is, again, having been in sales, right? This is targeted account selling.
Yeah,
Happens to be
exactly.
with marketing, helping you, hopefully. And maybe we could do that potentially without having to go buy some new technology, right? If
Yeah.
we know who it is we want to target.
Not to completely go on a tangent, but I truly believe one of the reasons ABM isn't as successful as it should be is because it got bundled in with a technology.
Yeah, right. And so, but I mean, but to say you're ready for doing something like that, then what you want to do is start mapping out, what are we ready to adopt? Does it need to be technology? Is there something that we could try? I'm also a big fan of this. I love people coming with ideas, right? And this goes back to my days of running web teams as well. And I get people all the time like, oh, why doesn't the website do this or that? And initially it was a little sort of taken aback and like took it personally. And I was like, wait a minute, I need to listen to these people because they're coming at it with a different perspective, different set of eyes, especially if they're in sales. I always, again, they're out there with the customers. They're thinking like customers more than we were. And so, I always tell people like, I want ideas. It doesn't mean we're going to do them, but what I look for is patterns, right? If you tell me, hey, we need to do ABM, and somebody else says, we need to target these accounts. There's starting to be a pattern here. Okay, now I'm saying, okay, maybe we're ready to go do something on that. And then we want to start building out that roadmap of what are the things we want to do process-wise, go-to-market-wise.
Totally, yeah.
That we can start to make, if we get to a point where we go, okay, to really scale it, that we need a technology to help scale it, or we need technology to automate a portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
But are there ways that we can try it without, spending a lot of time and money and effort and see, do we see and measure it? So key is measuring it really well and understanding, did it work, right? If it works, well, what part of it worked, what part of it didn't? Okay, do we need to go look at technology again? But I'm like that. I want to try things different ways. And so I think that's it. I don't know that you necessarily need this big long roadmap for technology, right?
Yep.
I think you need a general idea of what it is you need to address, right? Do you need to be addressing data quality? Do you need to be addressing a nurture program, redo? Do you need to be looking at how do you do personalization on your website and how do you tie that together? Like those, like think about it from that standpoint, like going to market and what are you going to be ready for? And the technology can follow. There's no shortage, as we talked about, there's no shortage of technology solutions.
Yep.
So
one final concept here, and it's related to what we were just talking about. You mentioned marketing automation at the core of a technology stack. And I think for most organizations, it likely is, at least on the marketing side, in conjunction with CRM.
Yep.
What does the future of marketing automation look like? Because we've talked about a lot of things, process, data, silos, this, that. And in my view, and I'm around quite a bit of marketing technology in my current role, the current marketing automation platforms that we think of when we think of marketing automations aren't the solution to all that.
No.
So does the future of marketing automation look different in your mind?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So I think the short answer to your question is I don't think they are the answer ultimately. And I think partially because of kind of how they're built. Now, maybe there's something out there that is, I'm not aware of that's in that next group of technologies out there or some open source, something like that is being built. But, what I've been interested in lately is some of the things that are out there that are helping to kind of bridge the data connections between these different things.
For sure.
Because that's where I started, I see the challenges. Is marketing automation going to get there? I don't know. I just don't know unless they evolve.
Right.
And I don't, it's going to be interesting to see with current situation, right? I truly believe, like say, for example, I thought Adobe was going to invest heavily in really trying to bring Marketo into the full, bring that into their overall sort of digital ecosystem on the B2B side. It'll be interesting to see if that happens. I haven't seen it, a ton of that with the Eloqua acquisition.
Sure.
Salesforce buying two different companies, right, in the space, right? So it's interesting to see. I don't know that they've all figured it out, but I'm starting to become a believer. Like marketing automation and nurture, right? That still has a place.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
we revamped our nurture program and kind of built out new tracks and content. But I kept coming back to like, no one's sitting out there waiting for that next nurture email, right? And so they're waiting. When they have time to go investigate something that you happen to offer or provide as a service or product,
Yeah.
right? You want to capture that moment, which means you need to be ready at the time when they engage, whether that's your website or
Yep.
a mobile app or whatever. And so connecting those dots between that and somebody else's, and then being able to measure that, like
It's a great point.
the data connections, and being able to make sure that across these different channels and different platforms, you're able to really make that environment, make it seem like a seamless interaction. That's going to be the future. And how that's going to happen, I don't know. I'm seeing some things now that make me think that I think there's a chance for that. It'll be, B2B world is, I think seems to me like I haven't been in the consumer world in so long
Yeah.
that, that seems like they're further along, right? I get, retargeted all the time, right?
Yeah.
I'm, but I don't see all that. I see some of that on the B2B side, but I don't see it as consistently. I don't see it done as well. And you see that, but you don't necessarily see a personalized, interaction on a website, right? And so, I think those are the things on the B2B side. Like if you can get that data figured out, and then you can turn that into real-time interaction improvements, that's
Yeah.
where the future will be.
Yeah, I think it's likely one of the maybe silver linings that come out of the current COVID situation, because it's forcing marketers to focus on things that matter. And the customer experience is really what matters, right? And to your point around connecting those dots, if they don't use what they have, which is you have data on your customers, you just don't know
Yes.
where to find it and how to use it.
Right.
If you don't figure that out, you're going to lose out, especially now when you need to meet them where they are. And if you don't know where they are, then that's a little bit of a problem.
Right.
So I think that will be one of the positive fallouts for marketing of all this, is they're going to have to take a look at the silos they've created, the data, where it lives, what does it mean, what are our customers saying, what are they doing, and how can we leverage it to actually give us a competitive advantage. Otherwise, they might not make it out.
Yeah, and I hope it is. I mean, I've seen a lot of them, a lot of stuff that's where you can clearly tell, like, they're reacting to the situation. And I mean, I've been getting emails from companies I hadn't interacted with in years, right, out of the
Yeah, for
blue.
sure.
And I'm so glad that they're there for me in this current situation. But I mean, it's the one thing I do hope comes out of it, because I think there's been enough backlash to that kind of, like, really, I guess what's the term would be tone deaf, but really, like,
Mm-hmm.
not really, like, if you're in an industry that you're selling something that has nothing to do with
Yeah, just
the
doing it
rate,
because you think it's the thing to do because everybody else is
like,
doing it. Yeah.
like I don't need to hear that, right?
Yeah.
But if you've got something important, that's valuable. Yeah, I think so. I do hope that not only will this make it better at them understanding how the data can be used, but also in how they message, right? And that that marketers become even more thoughtful
Yep.
about what they do, and considerate about people's time. So it needs to be a value, right? And it needs to be, well, and this may vary from country to country, but certainly in the U.S., right? Like, people get so much stuff, right? They don't get to the point. If you're trying to sell something, say, I'm selling you something. Like, but if you're not, and if you're just truly trying to help
I'm going
inform,
to
then
try
do
that
that.
next call I make.
Right.
Hey, I'm selling you something.
I, I'm telling you, I've taken calls from people because they were pretty upfront. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm upfront too. I'm like, listen, if there's a time, if not a time,
Yeah.
then we move on.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. I think there's certainly opportunities to just bring everything forward and get rid of some of the song and dance.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, for sure.
transparency and I think that's going to be. I do think that'll ultimately come out of this as being a good thing from
Yeah,
that standpoint.
for sure. Well, let's wrap with this. Where can we find you? What are you up to? Tell the people, how do they get in contact with you? I want to talk to you and bounce ideas off you. What are you doing? Just
Well, so
your pitch.
I am so currently on furlough. So Freeman, as many of your marketers know, is in the event business, and so me, along with many other people, have been affected. So I am looking to try to help other people as I can, right, doing things like this. And You can find me on LinkedIn, Michael Hartmann, Hartmann, 2 N's. Should be pretty easy to find now. You got the face to go with it too. But also, you drop me an email, michael@hartmanhouse.com. So again, Hartmann, 2 N's, HOUSE.com. But I'd be happy to help. Definitely keeping things open, right? Furlough means that they're expecting to bring people back. We don't
Right.
know, right? It all depends on what happens with the industry. So if there's something in the short term that somebody needs help with, or even the long term, I'd be happy to help out.
Awesome. Well, hopefully people will connect with you. What's anything behind the Hartman House email address that I should know about?
As we were starting to have kids, I wanted to get something that we could use to set them up with email addresses that weren't totally random. I'm sure they're doing it anyway, right? So we have some amount of visibility into what's going on, but really that was it. I wanted to have a personal domain. Didn't set up a website or anything. It's not our thing, but that was it.
That's killer. I love it. All right, Michael. Well, thank you for joining the show. It was fantastic to have you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Josh.
All right. You're welcome.